So every year, the first item of business on the Spartan government's agenda was to declare war on the Helots.
And that was just sort of a formal way of saying any Spartan peer can kill any Helot anytime he wants.
Thucydides tells a chilling story about how the Spartans gave out the word that any Helot who thought he had done the best service for Sparta in the war should come forward to be freed. And some 2,000 came forward. And the Spartans put garlands around their heads to indicate their freedom. They marched them up to the temple, and they were never seen again.
In addition to maintaining a continuous formal war on the Helots, the government's main priority was legislating every aspect of life in Laconia.
They would do the same things every day. They would roughly marry in the same age period. They would dress alike. They would talk alike. They would act alike.
To ensure equality, the government created a system in which, in principle, no Spartan could be wealthier than any other Spartan.
If there was a great difference in wealth or in obvious creature comforts, it would be disastrous.
They forced the size of the farm that supported each warrior family to be perpetually the same size. And that is only possible if you destroy a market system. And that meant there could be no money, there could be no open markets, there could be no exporting and importing.
To further eliminate the need for any kind of Spartan shopping spree, all households, by fiat, were designed exactly the same. Everything was functional, plain, and identical.
Spartan culture was austere. That's why we use the word Spartan to mean austere or tough today. In Sparta, it's really considered unacceptable for wealthy people to show off in the way that they dress. There is a austerity and equality, if you will, a lot of people wearing good Republican cloth coats in Sparta. Or if you think about the movement to have uniforms in our schools today, it's a similar sort of idea that clothes should not show inequality.
Even the speech of the elite Laconians was required to be austere.
The Spartans were trained to be men of few words. It matched the simplicity and the force of Spartan warriors.
Laconic speech is good for making snap decisions on the battlefield, but it's not good for sitting back and thinking about the big picture. And that's one of the big problems that the Spartans have.
To keep this system in place, Sparta's stand on foreign policy was equally laconic. Don't mix with strangers.
They didn't want anybody learning too much about Sparta, and furthermore, they didn't want Spartans learning too much about the rest of the world.
They wanted to preserve their customs. They wanted to preserve their nationality. And really, one doesn't preserve that by mingling with others.
Basically, they never left home. And on those occasions when groups of Spartans had to be away, connected with some military thing, for some period of time, they almost always misbehaved and went crazy because they simply didn't have any way of coping with that.
If all of these controls sound impossibly intrusive, they were. But government control over society was an accepted part of life in ancient Greece.
When the Greeks spoke about politics, they didn't only refer to a narrow constitution, a political arrangement. They thought that a regime was about the social arrangement, the cultural arrangement, the entire way of life. And we see this built into the Spartan system.
The primary means of indoctrinating Spartans into this new society would be an educational system that prepared 7-year-olds to become killing machines. The success of Sparta depended on a tightly controlled society. Over a 100-year period during the 7th century BC, Sparta invented and perfected the world's first system of social engineering. Control by the state began at birth. Inferior children were killed. Superior children were indoctrinated, trained, and molded into the kind of fighting force that could control the Helots, the enslaved people of Messenia.
Once you have a small population that must enslave a large population, then each Spartan, in the Spartan view, must be qualitatively superior to every 10 or 12 Messenians. The only way they felt they could achieve that level of military excellence was to bring all of the youths in a group, give them standardized training, and do it from a very early age.
When they were 7 years old, Spartan boys were taken away from home to be cared for and trained by the state. They lived in a kind of military academy called the Agogé.
At age 7, the young Spartan boy enters the world of males that really will be his life for the rest of his time, for as long as he survives. Initially, he is brought into what I have sometimes called the Cub Scout troop from hell.
The Agogé is 15 years long pep rally. The Spartans are being prepared to go into battle. And here an alleged saying of Patton comes to mind. Patton is supposed to have said to his men, "I don't want you to kill for me, I want you to die for me." And that's the thing about the Spartans, they are ready to die.
For a Spartan boy's first 5 years in the Agogé, from age 7 to age 12, a government trainer-in-chief called a Paidonomos instructed him in basic literacy and physical education. Discipline and punishment, however, were often meted out by slightly older boys.
The way to think about it is as if the toughest kids from your junior high school were put in charge of you when you just entered first grade. It is, I think, a system that, in a sense, uses the potential cruelty of children towards one another in order to try to teach this Spartan kid, from the very earliest age, that he has to absolutely obey every order that he is given from anyone who is a superior. It is a terrifying sort of vision.
The main lesson in the Agogé from day one was to toughen the boys for the hard life that lay ahead of them.
The Spartan training system was clearly meant to test for weakness and to cull out weakness. And throughout his life, a Spartan warrior had to worry about being watched by his fellow Spartans. They were constantly watching him for weakness, watching to see if he is really up to speed.
Again and again, the rule in the Agogé is, can you take it? How tough are you? Are you tough enough to be a Spartan male? This is a tough love system, and it's more tough than love.
Spartan girls also received training, but at home.
She was trained from childhood to be tough, to be physically fit at any rate, to be presumably to some extent self-reliant.
Because their raison d'etre was to produce strong sons to defend the community. They ate well, they participated in athletics, so they were, in a way, prime breeding specimens.
At age 12, Spartan boys entered the second level of Agogé training, and conditions got much worse. Each boy was issued a single cloth cloak. This was the only garment they were allowed to wear year-round. They were also required to go barefoot, all in the name of toughening them physically and mentally.
Anybody who's been to Laconia in the winter can see that the very idea that you would go barefooted or you'd have a single cloak would kill a modern American within minutes.
Tired and cold, the boys were also hungry.
The evening meals were cooked, if that's the right word, by the helot attendants. And they cooked absolutely horrendous food, apparently. And the most famous meal of the Spartans is what's called the blood soup. It's basically pork, with a lot of blood floating around.
Travelers to Sparta were appalled at the Spartan diet. One famous description was recorded by a visiting Sybarite from the north.
He came to Sparta and he said, after sampling this soup, he now understood why the Spartans were so willing to die.
The soup was not only bad, there wasn't enough of it.
You get enough food to survive, but you don't get enough food to be happy. And so you're taught right away that if you want to get enough food to be happy, to feel full, you're going to have to steal it.
That was done in part to keep them sharp, but also in part to teach them survival skills, because it was all part of the business of making a Spartan, who would be the kind of guy who could manage to forage around the country and keep himself alive if he had to.